Welcome to the Scam Economy with your host, Matt Bender.
Well, this has been quite the week. Sam Bankman-Fried, more like Sam Bankman, jailed? I don't know. Folks, welcome to Scam Economy. My name is Matt Binder, and last Monday, Sam Bankman-Fried was a free man. He was doing Twitter Spaces, planning on virtually attending a congressional hearing the next day, and by that night, he was behind bars in a jail cell in the Bahamas. He's been hit with what seems to be like a dozen criminal charges, and counting, and not counting the civil charges too. And there were congressional hearings in both the House and Senate on the FTX collapse and what went down. There is much to talk about, and I have a great guest on this episode to talk about it with for all of you. But before we do that, this is where I usually get in my regular, Scam Economy social media plugs. But this episode's a little bit different. Now, when I said it's been quite the week, I didn't just mean it's been quite the week for Sam Bankman-Fried. It's also been quite a week for me. If you haven't yet heard, on Thursday, December 16th, I was one of the journalists handpicked by Elon Musk to be suspended from Twitter for the crime of reporting on Elon Musk and what was going on at Twitter. By now, I've spoken to multiple different media outlets. I was on BBC, CBC, MSNBC, all the BCs, it seems. And on my other podcast, Doomed with Matt Binder, this week I spoke with Emma Vigeland as she basically interviewed me on what went down and how it went down. So be sure to just Google what happened if you're interested. Check out that episode of Doomed. And to everyone who reached out in support of me, I really appreciate it. And if you're still interested in supporting my work and what I do, you can go to patreon.com/Matt Binder and become a monthly paying subscriber. It helps me grow this show, create more content, and help me disseminate this content even further. And I'll throw in all my other usual plugs at the end of the episode. Because like I said, Sam Bankman-Fried arrested, FTX congressional hearings, we gotta talk about it all right now. And joining me now to discuss all of this, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome back to the show the creator of Web3 is Going Great, Molly White. Molly, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me back.
It's always so great to have you on because I feel like whenever there's disaster, that's when it's like, oh, let me ring Molly. So FTX, I've been nonstop FTX for the past month. And for people who may have missed what is going on, maybe this is their first episode listening to Scam Economy and they've been, permabanned from Twitter over the past couple of weeks maybe, and they haven't seen the words FTX and they haven't seen the name Sam Bankman-Fried. Can you summarize maybe what this whole scandal, this whole controversy, this whole, complete meltdown in the crypto ecosystem is that basically unraveled in the past month or so?
Yeah, I can. So FTX is a cryptocurrency exchange, which basically means it's just a platform where you can buy and sell crypto. You can hold crypto in your sort of account instead of keeping it in, a self-custody situation. And you can trade on leverage. There's all sorts of stuff like that as well, margin trading. And until a month ago, it was the second largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world. And then it sort of suddenly collapsed in a very short span of time. It went from everything was fine to, their balance sheet looks a little weird, to FTX is suspending withdrawals, to FTX is filing for bankruptcy, in a very short period of time. And to add a little more color, Sam Bankman-Fried, SBF is much shorter, was the CEO of FTX, and he also was the founder of a quantitative trading firm called Alameda Research. which he actually founded first. And a lot of the sort of incident that led up to the collapse, and now a lot of what's coming out that looks a lot like fraud, had to do with inappropriate transactions, basically, between Alameda Research and FTX, where FTX was sending customer funds from the exchange that they were supposed to just be holding on to over to Alameda Research, who was then using them for their trading activities.
Right. And so things sort of fell apart. I mean, for people, if you really want to go back and get deeper into all that, I had an interview with Mike Burgersberg, who helped sort of unveil this, that Alameda, the hedge fund in the FTX group, basically was insolvent, which helped lead to, along with that CoinDesk piece, helped lead to, things starting to unravel for FTX, like you just mentioned. So you can go back and check that out for a deeper discussion there about that specific thing. And so people were, before we get into like what just happened this last week, I think this is where we should talk about this. One of the bizarre things I saw is that after everything you just said happened, there was this weird sort of narrative that started going around. And everyone's favorite Twitter owner, Elon Musk, was really helping stoke this narrative that, like, nothing was going to be done to Sam Bankman-Fried. Like, he was going to get away with it, which seemed ludicrous. And now, as, you and I are both crypto skeptics. I even would say I don't know, I can't speak for you, but I would take it even a step further for me and say I am a crypto hater. I am anti-crypto completely. And I don't give anyone in this space the benefit of the doubt when I hear of some outright shady business. But when it all fell apart for SBF, here I was saying, like, clearly there is investigations going on. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that there are investigations going on. This isn't going to just get brushed under the rug like Musk and other people were saying. Even the pro-crypto people were like, oh, SBF's going to get away with it because he's in, like, the Democratic politicians' pockets. But it was super clear that there was a multiple investigations at the very least from probably multiple agencies, and it was only a matter of time. One of the things that probably helped slow things down a bit was that, unlike someone like Bernie Madoff, I would say Sam Bankman-Fried, under his, being that people don't know so much about crypto, he was a little bit more, covered by the fact that maybe he was doing something legit in his weird little industry and it just really did fall apart. And so that gave him maybe like a little bit, like maybe a few extra days of leeway. But it was obvious that like there was no way once everyone got on board with what was actually going on, he was going to get away with it.
Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of sort of like really weird, outlandish conspiracy theories going around. It was like 4chan level stuff, where they were like, well, Gary Gensler gave a lecture at MIT and Sam Bankman-Fried graduated from MIT. And so Gary Gensler didn't want to, do anything against Sam Bankman-Fried. And it's like, what? Like, how is that a connection? How is that evidence of anything? And so there was a lot of weird stuff out there around, oh, well, he donated all this money to Democrats, which is true. He did donate a lot of money. And most of the headlines were about him donating to Democrats. But it actually did eventually come out that he's been donating to Republicans, too. He was just doing it, sort of in a much quieter way.
Right. Also, I always feel like we have to mention this. Out of like the 40 million or so that he donated, like publicly, not dark money that we know about, over 10 million of that, more than 25%, because he even gave less than 40 million. I think it was like 36 or 37 million. More than 10 million of that went to a single Democratic primary candidate who lost in the primaries.
Yeah, his donations were like largely to the primaries and didn't seem to make that much of a difference in a lot of the cases. And so it was kind of like he was not really buying much influence when he was, contributing to campaigns that ultimately did not result in his candidate being elected.
Right. When it came through campaigns, it seemed like he was trying to be a power player by actually like electing people he wanted, but he didn't know too much about how campaigns work. So obviously most of his picked politicians failed. Like, to me, the more concerning role of him in politics is the lobbying he was doing, and how like, you know, he basically was right in some sitting you know, senators and Congress people's ears, like helping them sort of formulate very pro crypto regulation policy that obviously people need to make sure does not go through now that, you know, all this has happened for sure. Shouldn't have gone through before either, but definitely not now.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was kind of one of the theories. And then, you know, I think there was also just a lot of people who expected he was going to get arrested like immediately, you know, like FTX collapses, he steps down as CEO, and people are like, why didn't they pick him up? You know, like, why isn't he in jail right now? Like the day after it all happened, which would have been unbelievably quick. You know, even the month or so it took them to, you know, take him into custody in reality was unbelievably quick for something like this. You know, people have been comparing it to things like, you know, Madoff and various other large collapses and scams or frauds, basically. And like, you know, it can be years before, you know, between the collapse and when any actual charges are filed and, you know, any actual prison sentence might be served. And so the, you know, the fact that it was so quick, I think is actually kind of noteworthy. But, you know, people basically saw him sitting around in the Bahamas, giving all these interviews, talking about everything that people would listen to. And they were like, I don't get it. He's not in jail. So I think that may have contributed too, is that just people were like, what's taking so long? I don't understand. And so they started to come up with ideas for why it was taking so long, you know, but
the whole, oh, I can't believe he's talking to the New York Times and blah, blah, blah. That was always so bizarre to me, because it's like, this is actually what you want this guy to do. What are you kidding? You want him to talk as much as possible. This is all going to be used against him. If he broke and told the truth, then guess what? You have right there what he did. If he's lying, guess what? They're going to use that as part of the case against him. Whatever he said would have been great. Just let him talk.
Yeah, I ended up writing a blog post on that because I was hearing so much of that. People were like, stop, you know, giving him a platform, stop talking to Sam Bankman-Fried. And it's like, I get that you don't necessarily want to help this guy launder his reputation, but also like his public reputation is really not what's important right now. Like, it doesn't matter what I think of Sam Bankman-Fried. It matters what, you know, the Department of Justice thinks of Sam Bankman-Fried. And so I basically said, like, you know, take what he's saying with a grain of salt, assuming that, you know, assume that he is probably lying more often than he's telling the truth, but sure, keep him talking, you know, like you might as well.
Right. And you mentioned Bernie Madoff, and like, that was another thing I constantly saw, like, oh, why? Oh, look at this video of Bernie Madoff being accosted by all these journalists when he's walking through the streets of like New York. Why isn't this happening to Sam Bankman-Fried? And I was thinking to myself, like, the reason it's not happening to Sam Bankman-Fried is because he's literally in the Bahamas. What do you expect them to do? Like,
and also like not setting foot outside, as far as I can tell. I think he was being very cautious. He kept talking about paparazzi, and I think he was basically in some undisclosed location and not putting his head above ground, pretty much.
Right. So with that out of the way, let's now go to Monday, December 12th, 2022. Now, something big is going to happen a little bit later that day. But before that, you, Molly White, were in a Twitter Spaces chat with Sam Bankman-Fried himself in what appears to be, I guess, spoiler alert to the little thing I was just building up, the last interview with SBF as a completely free man.
Yeah, maybe. I think there was maybe a Forbes interview that was recorded like immediately afterwards, but I'll say maybe one of the last.
The last live interview. There we go. I found my way in. There you go.
There you go.
So what happened in that? I remember I didn't get a chance to listen to the whole thing, but what I did hear was interesting, and I saw that some drama came out of it where like apparently he was upset with some of the questioning. It apparently was with you and who else was in there from the Crypto Critics Corner?
Caspiancy,
Yeah, with the both of you in there, it was a little bit different than his usual Twitter Space chats where it was just a bunch of like really pro crypto bros. I know there was one where what's his face? Oh my god, I can't believe I'm having another Coffeezilla, thank you. I know there was one where he jumped in and got to get some questions to SBF, but other than Coffeezilla, you and oh my god, help me out here. Caspiancy. You're the only two who gave him a hard time.
Yeah, so I guess a little context on the Twitter Spaces stuff. Like, Sam Bankman-Fried had been doing all of these Twitter Spaces where he would just like jump in and talk to people. And so all these people, mostly in the crypto industry, started setting up Twitter Spaces with the idea that they were like going to interview Sam Bankman-Fried. And there was one where it was like they almost turned it into like an interrogation. It was very strange. But for the most part, a lot of the people were either, I wouldn't say that any of them were necessarily intentionally trying to be friendly to Sam, but a lot of them just didn't push very far on things or didn't question when he responded in sort of his usual way, which is to go on these very long tangents that sort of take you into a totally different subject and never actually answer the question that you're trying to ask. But the exception, as you mentioned, would be Coffeezilla joined 3 of those Twitter Spaces, actually. He joined one, and then Sam, I think, said that he had to go, like right as basically Coffeezilla asked like 2 questions or something like that, and then Sam's like, I really have to go, and he like left the chat. And then Coffeezilla joined another one later on, and none of these were like planned that Coffeezilla was going to join them, or at least if they were, it wasn't public knowledge or knowledge to Sam. And so he did that again. The same thing sort of happened where Sam left, basically. And then in a third one, he asked some follow-up question, and Sam basically blew up at him and was like, you're grandstanding, you're taking up all this time, stop, being so full of yourself and trying to, paint the story or whatever it was. And which was ridiculous because so many people have talked to him for so much longer than Coffeezilla had. But Coffeezilla had asked some really pertinent questions around segregation of customer funds, but between customers who were just holding crypto on the exchange versus customers who were trading using margin. And he basically did get Sam Bankman-Fried to admit that there was no actual segregation there, and that it was kind of just this one big pool of funds. And so when everyone was racing to withdraw their money, it was just sort of first come, first serve. But yeah, so ultimately, there was a large crypto Twitter account decided to put together yet another Twitter space. It was probably, it was at least the 4th one, but it was probably more like 5 or 6 that Sam had done. And they sent me a message and they're like, hey, do you want to come and ask him a couple questions? And I was like, sure, I would love to. And actually, one of the first things I did was message Coffeezilla because I had heard the previous one where Coffeezilla, where Sam Bankman-Fried basically blew up at Coffeezilla. And I got the sense that like if he were to join again, SBF would probably refuse to answer any questions. So I was like, if there's anything that you feel like is unanswered from your line of questioning, feel free to send it to me and I can ask. But he was pretty satisfied with what he had gotten out of Sam at that point. So I ended up just asking my own questions. But yeah, so I don't think he knew that we were going to be there. I don't think he knew at all who was going to be there. And so I don't know if he was expecting it to be sort of the same typical lineup or not. But I got the chance to ask him a couple questions, including... Well, first I asked him if he was playing video games, because in all of these Twitter spaces, you can hear him clicking with like a mouse in the background, like extremely rapidly. And it sounds exactly like someone who's playing League of Legends, which like I've heard a lot of people play League of Legends, and so I kind of know. It's definitely not just like some guy scrolling through Twitter or, whatever else he might be doing in the background when you're like sort of distracted. It definitely sounds like he's playing a video game. So I asked him that, and he admitted that he was playing a video game the whole time, which is ridiculous. Like,
I don't even get how you have the coordination to do that. I can't multitask like that. Like
no, I can't either.
You would absolutely know if I wasn't paying attention to you right now, Molly, because I would just be, what? Huh? Did you say something? What?
Right.
After you just said all that, I would have been like, I'm sorry. I didn't hear a word you said.
Yeah. Maybe it's just evidence that he truly is a superior mind. Who knows? But either way, he plays video games while he's answering questions. And it had actually been kind of a part of his sort of his whole shtick, where even like, you know, venture capital firms had written about how he had been playing League of Legends during a pitch meeting, as though that is something that you should like look at and say, oh, that sounds like someone I should trust with billions of dollars, and not, you know, a red flag.
Right. I feel like at least in like the Twitter Spaces in this context where he was answering questions about what happened, it's like whatever. Maybe he doesn't care. It's nonchalant. There's no big deal there. But if I was like an investor and I was getting a pitch from him, I would be like, is he just making this up as he goes along? He's just playing a game. Right. He's not listening like that. I mean, that's the only way I could do it. If I was like pitching somebody while playing a video game, it would definitely be like whatever just comes off the top of my head. Probably some things I was actually doing in the video game too. Like just like just because it would just randomly be in my head. You know, like there'll be I don't know, a castle with a princess, and your coins will be stored there, and I mean,
yeah,
a big lizard guy with that blows fire will be. Oh, I'm sorry, we're talking about a crypto exchange.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, if it wasn't for all the clicking, I don't think I would have known that he was playing a video game. He was, you know, he is very capable at answering questions, and not only answering questions but dodging questions while playing a video game, which just seems like it would be very difficult to do, but who knows. But then after that, I actually got to what I wanted to ask him, which was so the Monday that we were asking these questions of him, the subsequent day there was supposed to be a hearing in front of the U.S. Congress around FTX, and they had invited him to testify at that hearing, along with John J. Ray III, who is now the new CEO of FTX and in charge of unwinding the whole thing. And Sam Bankman-Fried had initially been really cagey about going to the hearing and testifying, and he had said that, you know, I don't have enough information. Maybe I'll testify when I have a better picture of what happened. To which, you know, Representative Waters said something like, well, you're talking about it at length, you know, all over the place. I think you can probably manage to give us some information, even if you don't have the full picture.
Did Maxine Waters say, I heard you talking to Molly White. How dare you?
Yeah, no, I think this was before our particular interview, because by the time I was talking to him, he had actually agreed that he was going to testify in front of the House. So I asked him if he was planning to attend in person or if he was going to appear virtually. And I also asked him why he was not planning to attend the Senate hearing, which was the day after the House hearing. And he, you know, to which he had also been invited, but he had declined. It just seemed really sort of strange that he would say yes to one, but not the other. And, you know, what's the difference to him? And his answers were very unsatisfying. He basically said he wasn't planning to testify in person because he said that he was needed in the Bahamas, basically, which is absurd because he is not working for FTX. He has no obligations to FTX. In fact, he has apparently been trying to talk to the people, you know, the new executives at FTX, and they are ignoring him.
Right.
Like, he has nothing to do with it.
Right.
So the idea that he is somehow needed there seems a little ridiculous. And then he was also saying that he was overbooked, which was just a ridiculous thing to say to someone that you're talking to on a Twitter space. It's like, really, is the Twitter space, you know, the important thing that you're skipping a Senate hearing for?
I got too many Twitter spaces scheduled.
Yeah, sorry, Senator. I'm
a man of my word. Whoever gets my schedule, the opening first, that's it. I don't go back on it.
So anyway, so he basically said that, and I obviously pushed back on that a little bit, and I was like, are you worried that if you were to set foot in the US that you might be detained? And he basically said no, and then he hadn't really thought about it, but that he probably should, which was just a very weird
Right.
moment.
Right.
It's like, that hasn't been what you've been thinking about for the past month solid.
Right. I mean, ironically though, it turns out that later that night he was needed in the Bahamas.
He was urgently.
I don't think he was gonna, even if he wasn't arrested that night, which in case I guess that's the first time I'm mentioning it. Spoiler: he got arrested that night. I mean, he was already in the Bahamas that day. I mean, there was no way he was planning to catch. What, he was going to catch the red eye to Washington D.C.? No, he wasn't planning on going. Yeah,
he was fully planning to appear virtually.
Yeah.
But I do think he probably was planning to testify, which I wish I could have seen. Honestly, like selfishly, I just wish I could have watched that, because it would have been just bonkers to watch that same guy try to actually testify in front of Congress people who, like, I don't want to say that they're knowledgeable necessarily about crypto, some more than others for sure, but like they definitely don't take as much they're definitely not as welcoming to someone like Sam Bankman-Fried as a lot of the people in the crypto Twitter spaces who are like, okay, sure, I guess that makes sense, Sam, and like,
Right.
I think they would have been pretty tough on him, and I don't know if he would have been well prepared for that.
Right. I completely agree with you. I wish it did happen so we could have seen it. Like, it would have been quite the show. But also, when he got arrested that night, the conspiracies came back about like, oh, I see. He was arrested so he wouldn't have to testify
to protect him.
Yeah. Otherwise, because then he would have came before Congress and he would have lied to them, and then he would have committed a crime. And it's like, wait a minute. Why do you think they just arrested him? They have all they need to prove he committed a crime if they just arrested him. In fact, they have plenty to prove, apparently, that he committed many crimes.
Yes. They had no shortage of crimes.
Right. And crimes a lot more serious than the death penalty punishment that you receive from lying to Congress. I mean, who cares if you lied? I think the person who said it best, Popat, was on. Do you remember the podcast he was on? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's his own podcast. It's called Serious Trouble.
Okay, I just heard a clip on Twitter. He basically made the joke like, "Who cares about lying to Congress? That's like nothing. People lie to Congress all the time. No, what's gonna happen? They're gonna wag their finger at him. It's like,
yeah. He basically said it was as if someone being charged for murder was also charged for jaywalking. It's like the magnitude between a lying to Congress charge and the wire fraud and all these other charges that he's facing is just not even comparable.
Right.
But
So
I do think there were some legitimate questions just around like what happened with the timing. Like even some of the Congress people seemed really confused about it when I was watching the hearing. They were like, what was the rush? Couldn't you have waited for him to, because regardless of whether or not he lied, it may have been usable to have him testify under oath for hours,
Right. My assumption is like, because apparently what we learned later on is that, like after he was arrested, that like apparently there was someone spilled the beans on him, well before FTX actually collapsed, and
really?
That's what I was reading. I'm not sure if the name I saw is what people is rumor and speculation, or if it's fact, so I'm gonna leave the name out. But I mean,
there has been a lot of speculation that various executives at FTX or at Alameda have been cooperating with investigations, which I think is almost certainly true. Like, just chances are at least one of them is like, I don't want to spend life in prison, and has decided to talk to authorities or whatever. Even some of the wording actually, I watched the press conference that was held after the congressional hearing it was like a joint press conference between all of the agencies who charged SBF with various things. And the U.S. Attorney's Office basically said that, like, for any of you who haven't yet come forward, you can come and reach out to us. We would love to hear what you have to say, which to me very much suggested that there were, some executives who had yet come forward. But, they were pretty, they sort of dodged the question when someone outright asked, which, like, of course they did.
Right. Yeah. My feeling is they had everything they needed, and the congressional hearing wasn't going to matter to them. And
Yeah.
I think maybe once they had everything they needed, they thought we need to grab him before something changes and we can't find him or something like that.
Yeah, I listened to the whole Pope Pat episode, that the Serious Trouble episode, which was actually super helpful because, like, I sort of am able to pick up on some of the financial stuff and some of the, economic stuff and some of the, all these different sort of fields that crypto ends up touching, some of the, sociological stuff, the political stuff. But boy, when it gets into like real legalese, I was like, oh man, I'm like trying to follow it as best I can, but it's hard.
Right.
And so having, Pope Pat, or Ken White is his real name, no relation as far as I know. Although that would be funny. Having him sort of go through and just explain some of the stuff and like why it probably took a month and, why he might have been arrested so quickly, between, the period at which the charges were filed and, so quickly that he couldn't testify in front of Congress. And so, Pope Pat basically said that he thinks that some of it may have been a perception issue, which I think makes some sense, that, having Sam Bankman-Fried just sort of jaunting around the Bahamas, talking about all of the fraud that he had been doing kind of made the DOJ look bad.
Right.
And it was like, so, what is taking them so long? And people obviously, are not always so understanding that maybe they're meticulously putting a case together. And so, I can kind of understand some of that.
No, absolutely. I mean, let me read some of these charges here. So we got from the Justice Department, the DOJ, conspiracy to commit wire fraud on customers, conspiracy to commit wire fraud on lenders, conspiracy to commit commodities fraud, conspiracy to commit securities fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and violate campaign finance law. Now, that one's an interest. That one I'm looking forward to.
They threw that one in for flavor.
Yeah. And then along with that, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission hit him with 2 counts of violating the anti-fraud provisions of the Commodity Exchange Act. And then on top of that, the SEC came in and hit him with 2 counts of securities fraud, which violates the anti-fraud provisions of the Securities Exchange Acts of 1933 and 1934. I mean, they're going way back there.
A lot of securities law does go way back. Yeah. So they kind of just piled it all on. And it's going to be interesting. That's another thing actually that Pope Pat mentioned in his podcast, is that like it's kind of tough for Sam to have at the same time, criminal charges out of the DOJ and then civil charges out of the SEC. And he was saying that basically, like, if you are a civil defendant in a case from the SEC, it is within your best interest to sort of give all the information you can and explain what happened and go into great detail. Whereas if you're, defending yourself in a criminal case, you probably want to avoid details that might incriminate you. And so having to have both of those at the same time is like kind of pulling you in different directions. Right. And I guess a lot of the time, when that happens, when there's simultaneous civil and criminal cases, they'll request a stay on the civil case until the criminal case is done. And then after that, they'll take care of the civil case. But Ken White was saying that basically, like, given that Sam Bankman-Fried has been talking at length to everybody about what happened, like, it may be a difficult argument to try to get a stay in the civil case because he's just been like so willing to come out with all the details that he at least feels are convenient to share. And so, it may end up being that he's not able to do that and we'll have to sort of make a tough decision there. But anyway, I highly recommend the episode of the podcast because I learned a lot from it.
Yes, everyone should check it out for sure. Because this is where we will end the legal discussion portion of this, because we are not legal experts.
Before we are fully out of our depth, yes.
Right. But I felt we had to at least mention the charges, It would have been weird to just go like, and then a bunch of legal stuff happened, but we'll leave that to somebody else. So let's now talk about those 2 congressional hearings, because I saw the whole first one. And then the second one, I saw bits and pieces because I was doing some other stuff for work. But I know you were fully live tweeting.
Jacked into the Matrix and watching. Yep.
Right. And you were also over on Mastodon as well, I believe, live tooting, right? Isn't that what you...
Yes. I get so much joy out of the fact that Mastodon calls it tooting that I use the word at every opportunity.
Right. Some live toots for you all. Yes.
Yep.
So let's talk about that first congressional hearing. Now, who was that before? That was the House hearing, correct?
Yep. So that was the House Financial Services Committee.
And that one only had one single witness giving testimony, and that is the new CEO of FTX, the guy who cleaned up over at Enron, who has then gone on record saying that he's never seen anything before like FTX. I mean, that's just bonkers that the Enron guy is like, man, I haven't seen anything like FTX before.
Yeah, right. I mean, but he's said things that are very damning in a couple of different directions. He's on one hand said that compared to Enron, this is like so much poorer record keeping, just total, total mess, total lack of corporate control, I think is what he keeps saying. But on the other hand, he said that also compared to Enron, there is very little sophistication as far as the fraud itself. Like, it was not this big mastermind crime. It was just like kind of plain old fraud.
Right.
With so these guys, worlds.
Right. These guys were the worst I've ever seen in the legit stuff, and were the worst I've ever seen in the scammer fraud stuff.
Yeah, they didn't even do the fraud well.
I mean, that's really funny. And the new CEO of FTX, who we're talking about, is John J. Ray III.
Yes.
And Ray went before Congress and he spoke to them, and there were some like this one wasn't like usually they have the perpetrator before them, like the person they're angry at. You know what I mean?
Right.
At these hearings, these congressional hearings, but like they couldn't really get mad at this. Like a few of them actually did, and it was bizarre. It was like, this dude wasn't there. Like, what are you getting mad at?
Right. Yeah, and a couple points, John J. Ray made comments about, he would say things about like, we, the company, FTX,
that's what he's got to do. He's the representative of the company now. Yeah.
Yeah, but he would say something about how like we lost $8 billion, and I'm like, well, you actually weren't there for that. So
right. That's very generous of you to say we lost.
I thought so too. Yeah, he's like sort of kind of taking responsibility, even though he had no reason to have to do so.
Right. And then sometimes they would like yell at him like, tell us this information. And he was just like, I don't know it. I wasn't there. We're still looking into it.
I literally got here a month ago and I am still figuring out where the keys are.
Right. And I'm sure he had to do someone had to probably come in and I mean, that person's probably still there. Someone's got to help explain to him the crypto stuff. Like he's probably way out of his depth there. Like just because he's an expert in these financial firms and, firms that are bad businesses or partake in outright fraud doesn't mean he's also going to be the crypto expert guy either,
Yeah, I was actually a little worried about that when he was first, brought on as CEO. I was like, is he going to be able to sort of untangle all this? But I mean, on the one hand, it doesn't really matter if he knows a ton about crypto. Like his role is he's not going to be the one like tracing stuff through the blockchain, right?
Although I would like to imagine that.
Yeah.
Him sitting there.
But he also actually, at a couple points during the hearing, explained a few things to Congress people in ways that made me think that he's actually been briefed pretty well. Like he said there were a couple of things that it was like, I would not have expected someone who just started looking into crypto a month ago to be able to explain that. So, in that case, I was kind of like, oh, okay, maybe he's actually a pretty quick learner.
Right. Yeah. We actually, well, again, like I said, usually it's heated, which, maybe it was good this one wasn't, because I think some information came out of Ray that, if SBF was there, maybe we wouldn't have gotten around to. Ray did drop some very interesting tidbits, like how their invoicing system was basically to like drop the invoice and get approval within Slack. Which, like, listen, that one was like, I listen. I get a lot of these young startup companies. I use Slack. I mean, in my my job we use Slack because it's very tech savvy. But there's still like the accounting department or whoever that
You
actually
have an
like,
accounting department, yeah.
right, that pulls the paperwork together after things are actually like given the approval in Slack, and they actually make it official in the background. But to me, the crazy one was the QuickBooks moment.
The FTX group is unusual in the sense that, I've done probably a dozen large, scale bankruptcies over my career, including Enron, of course. Every one of those entities had some financial problem or another. They have some characteristics that are in common. This one is unusual, and it's unusual in the sense that literally, there's no record keeping whatsoever. It's in the absence of record keeping. Employees would communicate, invoicing and expenses on Slack, which is, essentially a way of communicating for chat rooms. They use QuickBooks, a multi-billion-dollar company using QuickBooks. QuickBooks. Nothing against QuickBooks, very nice tool, just not for a multi-billion-dollar company.
I mean, listen, I don't use any accounting software. I literally just cobble together my taxes and look at my bank account statements and do everything. But I'm dealing with a couple of $1,000s a month. I'm not dealing with QuickBooks is probably actually too big for me.
Right. I'm over here with a Google spreadsheet, so
right.
That's where I max out.
But QuickBooks for a multi-billion-dollar company, does this seem like they're a little bit out of their depth? I mean, QuickBooks actually seems like it should be out of its depth.
Yeah. On the other hand, though, given some of the things that he had said about their accounting, I was kind of like, oh, they're using QuickBooks. That's better than I expected.
Also, maybe the actual amount of real money was enough to actually make it fit into QuickBooks.
Yeah, that's true. It was like tens of billions of fake crypto and then like 100,000 of real dollars. That was sufficient.
Right. It was like a Fortune 500 company on the in the sheets, but just a small business with a couple $100K in the streets, maybe. I don't know.
I think the sheets would be QuickBooks, right? So you'd have to reverse that.
Right, yes. That's right. That's true. Right. Oh, man. I mean, and then what you brought up, how apparently they didn't have an accounting department. They didn't have any accountants. They didn't have human resources. I'm guessing the human resources department, if it had existed, would have taken real issue with some of the things that we've heard in the background that went on.
Some of the rumors, yeah.
Yeah.
Either that or the human resources person was in the polycule. Who knows?
Right. Yes, that could have been true too. Right. Apparently, there were lawyers, and I could attest to that because when I spoke to the guy who runs the Aid for Ukraine program on one of the episodes I did, he said that FTX came with their lawyers ready to go to set that up. So that doesn't surprise me that if, you were trying to commit, mass fraud, you would try to visually make it look as legal as possible. So you would hire a lot of lawyers to make it look good.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, a bunch of the stuff that they were doing, you kind of really have to have lawyers for. And so it's like, just because you have lawyers doesn't necessarily mean everything is legal.
Oh, right. I mean, if you're hiring lawyers, I mean, anyone could find, I mean, Donald Trump had lawyers arguing to overturn the election. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
If you're paying somebody, there's someone out there who'll take your money to fight for you.
Right. Especially if you're paying as well as FTX was allegedly paying. Plus there's the Bahamas real estate. I mean, it was a pretty sweet gig as far as I can tell.
Right. Is there anything we didn't mention that sticks out to you in that House hearing with Ray?
I think some of the I mean, it was a very long hearing. It was like 4 hours long. Some of the interesting stuff in it had to do with Bahamian regulators and the bankruptcy process on the Bahamas side. Um, it sounds like the CEO of FTX is sort of trying to cooperate with the bankruptcy lawyers on the Bahamas side, which he said is a very normal thing. That, they do that all the time when there are bankruptcies. It's often cross-jurisdictional. They often have to cooperate, and it usually goes very smoothly. And he was commenting on the fact that it has been going unusually not smoothly in this case, where he's having a really hard time with it. And there were some kind of pointed questions from Congress people also just around Bahamian authorities, like maybe there was wrongdoing there, maybe the Bahamas authorities were trying to get FTX to transfer money, so that they could have control of it in the bankruptcy proceedings there instead of the ones in the US. So there's a lot of weird stuff going on just in terms of the sort of jurisdictional fight, both in the sense of the actual bankruptcy, but also I think increasingly in the sense of the criminal investigation. Like this is kind of off topic from the hearing, but Sam Bankman-Fried has been taken into custody in the Bahamas, and he is currently in a jail in the Bahamas, where he will presumably await extradition to the U.S. And
I think it's happening. I'm not sure if it happened today.
Well, there's kind of an update on that, which is that at first he had said his lawyers basically said that they might fight extradition, which is kind of a wild announcement that everyone was like, okay, like that's kind of weird. And then like a day or two later, Sam Bankman-Fried or his lawyers basically said, no, actually, we're going to go along with the extradition. And everyone was like, okay, cool. And then today there was a hearing where I think everyone expected that he was just going to show up and say, yes, I'm okay with being extradited. And they would be like, great, stamp off on it and send him off to the US. But the I don't remember the title for the person in charge, the judge adjacent person in the Bahamas, eventually ended up sending him back to Bahamas jail, even though he's like okay with being extradited. And so people are like, well, what is going on? Like, is everything okay over there? And now there are, of course, conspiracy theories around, is he going to be killed in Bahamas prison before he can, or Bahamas jail before he can, incriminate other people or, tattle on the Bahamas regulators or whatever it is. And it's like, I don't know.
Right. It's just so much going on there with just what see. I mean, you're going to jail, buddy. Whatever you're doing to fight it just seems like I don't see. Will he maybe defeat some of these charges? I mean, maybe, but I think the odds are not in his favor. I mean, he certainly seems like impossible that he's getting off scot-free in any way. The question is just how long will he go away for?
Yeah, exactly. And also the various agencies who've charged him have said explicitly that this is kind of just the beginning. This is like what they could cobble together in a month, but they were like, yes, there are going to be more charges, almost certainly against more people. One thing that is a little bit unusual is that the charges are currently only filed against Sam Bankman-Fried, even though like the chances that he was pulling this all off single-handedly and every single other person involved was like, thought it was all fine.
Right.
Probably not likely.
Yeah. The question is like, Bernie Madoff, we keep bringing him up. So this seems like the right person to bring up as the example. Like he was already like fairly older guy when he got arrested and his jig was up. SBF is what, 30 years old?
Yeah.
Dude just threw away his life. I mean, I'm not saying that to feel bad for him. I'm just pointing out like, what a dumb thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, he could be in prison until he's like 70 or 80. I mean, and the weird thing around some of the charges too is that like the sentencing guidelines kind of are hard to even apply to this case because for one, I forget which it was, but I think it's like wire fraud. It's like for each transaction you get some suggested thing. And so it's like, this could be, I mean, it could be like a 1,000,000-year sentence if you were to just take the sentencing guidelines at face value. And then, if you're looking at like the general sentencing guidelines around some of the like wire fraud stuff, it tops out at like, I forget if it's a couple 100 million or something like that, but it's like below the level of billions of dollars that were, stolen and misappropriated in this case. So, I mean, he's definitely not looking at, a little bit of house arrest with an ankle monitor, I think is a pretty safe assumption.
Right. So before we move on to that second hearing, the one in the Senate, I want to just briefly mention SBF's genius move. Because before it seemed like he was planning on providing a testimony, but virtually, because once the hearing started, I think it was Forbes.
Yeah.
Forbes got their hands on what SBF had prepared for his opening statement when he assumed he was going to be providing it. And this did not sit well with some of the Congress members who were there who put this statement on the record. SBF's genius move to, win over these individuals roughly aged, between 60 and 95 years old was to say, I would like to start by formally stating under oath, I fucked up. I mean, what a dumb move. Like, this is like you need to like go up there and like act like what you would do to like when your grandma would get mad at you and like whatever you think would like win her over. Would you win over your grandma by going like, shit, grandma, I really fucked everything up. God damn it. Like, no.
There was this great moment where I think was it Representative Cleaver?
It was Cleaver. He was the one who was absolutely... He said, this is disgusting.
Yeah, he was like horrified about it, and he wouldn't even say it. He's like, I can't even say it, and so I immediately knew exactly what Sam Bankman-Fried was planning to say. But he was very upset about the whole thing.
Right, he said disrespectful, absolutely insulting. He said you would not. This one was funny because it doesn't make any sense. He said you would not read this testimony in front of your children. I'm like, wait, why what scenario would you be reading one of these testimonies?
His kids usually tune into these things because they love watching hours upon hours of Congress people talking.
Right, or maybe when it's bedtime stories with Grandpa Cleaver, they sit down
and knocks them right out.
Yeah, he just reads them testimony from that day's hearing. Right. Oh man, it was really great. It was really great.
Yeah, it was very weird too. Like if you keep reading, he had the statement, but then towards the end, it sort of just turned into a bunch of like bullet points instead of like a written statement. And some of the stuff that he sort of felt the need to address was like very weird. Like he wanted to talk about how he's not on amphetamines, for example. Like there are all these theories that he's really hopped up on, basically Adderall, but fancier or whatever, and he went into detail around how no, it's not that. And he does take a prescription for depression, which, people are getting all confused. They think it's supposed to be some Parkinson's thing, but it's different. And I mean, he's going into like extreme detail about this kind of stuff. And he even said something like, I have been sad for most of my adult life or something like that, in this section where he's talking about taking a depression med. It's like kind of oversharing with Congress. And then he even went into like, there have been, people have obviously been coming up with these theories that he's Jewish and that, that is why he was, I don't know, doing whatever it is. And he like went into debunking those too.
Wait,
like,
did he say like, for the record, I am not Jewish?
He literally like talked about how
I missed that part.
Yeah, he was like talking about how, his name sounds pretty Jewish and there are, if you go far enough back, but he's not really religious. And I was like, Congress doesn't care, like they're not in here investigating if you're Jewish.
Right.
At least I hope not. Maybe some of the Congress people are.
Right. That's really, wow. And I got to say, as someone who, when I sit still for a long time, you probably notice it when I'm talking to you, Molly, or when I'm people who watch me on YouTube or doing interviews. I get the jitters sometimes. I have a very hard time standing still. I blink a lot sometimes when I'm tired. So in that aspect, I think I found something I relate to with SPF.
Yeah, people were really like blowing it out of proportion where it's like he's clearly just bouncing his leg a lot of the time. And it's like, have you never met somebody who does that? Like,
Right.
That's really common.
Right. I could assure you all, I mean, you could just tell by how I dress, how I look, how I live. I'm not defrauding people of billions of dollars. You could just have a tick sometimes,
Yeah. And you're also probably not on like designer methamphetamine,
I'm actually straight edge. I'm famously
Yeah.
straight edge. Everyone knows I'm straight edge. I actually have
Right.
never done any drugs whatsoever in my life, if you could believe it. The last time I drank a beer was in sophomore year of high school.
Yep. So here's living proof that you can be a little bit jittery without necessarily being hopped up on some kind of stimulants. Although I think there was some reporting around, like there was some guy who was like the house shrink, who like worked for FTX and who kind of overprescribed various uppers and things like that. But I don't know how much truth there was to any of it.
Right. Listen, I can totally. I've had people literally just out of the blue watch a video of mine and say, "Are you on cocaine?" And it's like, what? No, I'm not.
Excuse me? It's just a weird thing to just ask.
I mean, I guess I just naturally look that way. So let's. If you go way back, actually, in my family history, you'll probably find someone who did do a lot of cocaine.
Who did do cocaine? Yeah.
So let's talk about this Senate hearing. Now, this one was where sparks did fly.
Yes, a little bit. I actually ultimately found it less useful than the congressional hearing, just because, like, in the congressional hearing, they at least had John J. Ray there. And in this one, they did bring 4 witnesses, but none of them were insiders. And either during, the FTX operations before the bankruptcy, or now, obviously, John J. Ray has access to a lot of information that, you and I don't know about. But for the Senate, they just brought in... there was Professor Hillary Allen, who was a great choice, actually.
And someone I need to get on this show. Yes, she's very
Absolutely,
good.
Yeah, I wish she would do more, like podcasts and things like that, because she's great. But I was really delighted when I saw her name on the list. And then, of course, Ben McKenzie, the crypto critic.
Wait, hold on. I thought you told me that there was no one with insider information on this panel. I have seen the photo of Ben McKenzie hanging out with SBF,
looking
arm around him, huge smile on their face, obviously scheming.
I love that picture. I think Ben has it set as his Twitter profile picture right now, where he's just like deadpan looking at the camera.
Yeah. For the purpose of the people who listen to the podcast and don't know what photo we're talking about, I did not describe it accurately. That was the joke. Basically, when Ben McKenzie was working on his book with his book partner came on this show not too long ago, Jacob Silverman. And they were working on their book, and they got an interview with SBF. They got a chance to meet with him for the book, and Ben McKenzie took a photo with him, and this photo is the most awkward looking photo you've ever seen. It's Ben McKenzie like literally like giving like a mean mug, like just mean mug in the camera, standing like half an arm's length away from SBF, and SBF looking clearly uncomfortable. And like trying to like sort of smirk at the camera. And it's obvious that like they took that photo to like add it as a really funny like picture insert in the book.
I can't tell like if that was just how the photo came out, but it cracks me up. It is very funny.
Oh, as someone who has taken that same exact photo with numerous Republicans at CPAC, I can tell you exactly what he meant how he was taking that photo. It's the same thing. It's just
I mean, I definitely think it was planned on Ben's part. I don't know if Sam Bankman-Fried's face was.
Oh, right. Okay. Right. I
Yeah.
have no idea what SBF was thinking, except probably very awkward guy. I'm just like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll take the photo,
Yeah. Right. But so
but
Ben
there were
McKenzie
people
was
who were
there.
trying to act like Ben McKenzie was actually friends with SBF because of this one photo of them.
Yeah, like it's like, what do you think they talked about exactly?
Right? Like they were like, what did you know, Ben? How could you let this go on?
Yeah, right. So that was two of the witnesses, and then they also brought in Jennifer J. Schulp, I think her name is. She's with the Cato Institute. She's basically like a libertarian economist.
I'm sure we got some good stuff out of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what you expect, right? Yeah. And then, of course, Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, was there, which was just a weird choice.
Right. I was glad he was there, though, because it really...
I found myself wondering, like, maybe he was invited by someone who doesn't really like crypto because they knew he would make it look bad.
Yeah, like this, put like a sycophant on display. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, really, it was amazing. Because this guy... Yeah,
I was just going to say, like, ultimately, I suspect he was invited by somebody who is pro-crypto, but, like, it didn't go very well.
Right, they're in such a bubble. They think that, like, having someone there to defend crypto so like strenuously will, like, be good. But what they don't realize is most people look at this stuff and see you like defending a scam. Like, it's like you're open. First
shilling.
Of all, right, shilling. He's openly saying he got screwed over and like saying he would have done it again if he had a chance. Like, really bizarre, like really weird. Like, kept talking up SBF too in like really weird ways. Like, even before he went on that panel, he was actually more, as crazy as that panel was, he was actually more reserved on the panel because like in the weeks before he was like, that kid was going places, you see, I would have given him more money even after I found out it was a fraud if he just didn't admit to it,
Yeah. I know, it was wild. And he kept saying things that it was like he wanted people to feel bad for him for losing millions of dollars that he was like, FTX had a deal with him, then they were going to pay him $15 million. And then he took that money and put it on FTX and used it for crypto stuff. And obviously lost access to it along with everyone else. And it's like, no one cares that Kevin O'Leary lost however many $1 million. Like,
he didn't really lose. Yeah. He didn't really even lose any of his own money. He basically just did free spokesman work for FTX at the end of the day.
Yeah,
it wasn't
exactly.
like... Yeah, it wasn't like his
paid an
money.
Exorbitant amount to be a spokesperson, and then now he doesn't have that money. And it's like, oh no, how's he going to put the food on the table? It's like no one cares, Kevin O'Leary.
Right. For me, there was a lot of great like back and forth moments from what I saw. You probably will be able to tell us a little bit more about your favorites because you probably saw more. But my favorite that I saw was when Professor Hillary Allen just outright said like the appropriate way to respond to this, and this is not verbatim, but she basically said like the appropriate way to respond to this is to ban it. And then she said like beyond doing that, if we couldn't do that, it would be to like treat it like a casino, like treat it like gambling. Because that's exactly how I feel, and I don't know if that's ever been said before Congress before. Because that's what should be done. I mean, I understand that outright banning something like this might be next to impossible. So then just make it officially a casino. Make it officially straight up gambling, because essentially that's what it is. It's playing the lottery.
Yeah, so, I mean, she definitely has stronger opinions on that than I do. I am not in camp ban crypto, but I very much see where she's coming from. And, I think she also recognizes that it's just not going to happen. She basically, like, at one point someone asked her, if you were queen for a day, what would you do? And she said, well, I'd ban crypto. But then she said, but, if I had constituents and, if I was not in a total monarchy, I would. And then she went on to say, have it all regulated as a security, and she would strengthen banking regulations and all these other things, which are quite reasonable. And I do think that those make a lot of sense. So, I think that is her preference, but it is not something she sees as particularly likely to happen.
All right. So was there anything that that you thought? I think Ben McKenzie had a great moment too with one of his speeches where he basically called out crypto for exactly what it was, and I think his big take home there was it's going to keep happening. This is the industry. Like this isn't like an aberration. This is the norm.
Right. Yeah, and that's something that I've been saying a lot of this past couple of weeks. Is I feel like I've been a broken record, but it's so clear. We're starting to see the Congress people and the representatives, the senators themselves are taking the line that this isn't a crypto problem, this is an FTX problem. That this is a fraud thing, not a crypto thing or whatever. That SBF is just a bad apple, FTX is just a bad apple, and we don't want this to tarnish the reputation of crypto. And Ben was saying again kind of what I've been saying, which is that like no this is absolutely crypto. There's a reason that we see these things happening over and over and over again. And I think Ben was pretty effective in some of the stuff that he said, where he was just very direct and clear around like people are getting really hurt by this. There is nothing happening in the way of the regulations that should be being applied. And this is exactly what happens when that, is the circumstance that you're providing to people. Right.
It's, it really like boggles my mind how some people look at this. It's like when how many more things need to happen? Like how many more crypto lending companies need to go bankrupt? How many more exchanges need to be basically collapse after admitting they were built on nothing but hot air? How many stable coins need to fail? How many fly-by-night crypto tokens need to be, shown to be straight-up rug pulls and scams? How many, companies and bridges and networks need to be hacked? How many bored apes need to go missing before people realize that this is what this is. It's just a rife with crime and scams and fraud. And if you're not outright scamming people, then you're scamming people. And this is my opinion. Then you're scamming people without realizing you're scamming people. I mean, those are the two options. There's no other option in this world.
Right. Yeah. And I do think that to some extent, some people are actually kind of waking up to that. Recently, it feels like there have been a lot of people who are saying that, like, you know what, I don't want anything to do with this. I am getting out. It's definitely not the majority of people, but I feel like I have been seeing more of it than I saw, earlier this spring when there were collapses and things like that. People are they've seen, a whole string of failures this year that have really sort of taken the life out of the crypto industry for them, and it's like not fun anymore or whatever. But you're absolutely right that for a lot of people that it doesn't matter. It's like any number of failures seems to be things that they can just brush off as a one-time accident, even though it's happened. This year alone, we've had Terra Luna at the beginning of the year, then we had Three Arrows Capital, Voyager, Celsius both went bankrupt. BlockFi almost exploded. It's like, and then FTX went down. It's just like one thing after another. It's been almost. I don't even want to say almost. It's been unprecedented in crypto how badly this year went, and yet people are still like, "This is great." It's like you can buy low. This is the time to build, and it's like, what? Have you seen what just happened this whole year and how many people were absolutely ruined by it?
Right. Well, that's a conversation for another day. So Molly White, developer and creator of Web3 is Going Great. Thank you so much for joining me and breaking down the latest with FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
I was happy to be back.
And where can people find you?
I am on Twitter for the time being at Molly0xFFF. I'm also on Mastodon. I am Molly0xFFF at hachyderm.io over there, HACHYDERM.io. And then you can, as always, find me at mollywhite.net, newsletter.mollywhite.net, and every other place on the internet that I'm at. There's a lot.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be a lot more, I think, as as people try to find a new place, a new home. Right. Thanks again, Molly.
Thanks for having me.
12 criminal charges, 6 SBF Twitter spaces, 2 congressional hearings. SBF is jailed. Okay, I'm done. Gotta get into the holiday spirit, you know? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Scam Economy and the marathon of FTX coverage we've been providing you on this show. And to support this show and help it grow, you can go to patreon.com/MattBinder and become a monthly paying subscriber. You can also go to youtube.com/MattBinder and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can go to twitch.tv/MattBinder and follow me there. And if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, connect your Amazon account to your Twitch account and you get a free Twitch Prime subscription to give to your favorite creator each month. Consider it if you haven't already done it. You can follow me on Mastodon now. I am on Mastodon, the alternative Twitter platform. You can find me at mattbinder at mastodon.social. You can still find this show on Twitter at Scam Economy. Go to scameconomy.com for all the links to the podcast version of this show. And if you haven't already, go to Apple Podcasts, go to Spotify, go to your favorite podcast platform and leave a review. It helps push Scam Economy up the podcast chart rankings and in turn gets this show in front of more people. I want to thank you all once again for all your support over this past year. The first full year of Scam Economy has almost completed. Launched this show in January, and here we are ending out 2022. Stay away from the scams, the grifts, and all the frauds as you celebrate whatever it is you do. Happy holidays, everyone, and I will see you all next time on the Scam Economy.